currency market is one big sigh of relief today, with the rand trading back below 15 to the dollar after our stay of execution on Friday. We're also benefiting from a weak greenback. A reprieve then, but what is the longer-term picture for our currency, bearing in mind that this too is something that Standard & Poor's is concerned about, and it could lower our ratings if wealth levels continue to decline in US dollar terms. Adrian Saville is Chief Strategist at Saville. He put out a fairly meaty note on the rand this morning and joins us now in studio. Adrian, nice to have you in studio.
Thank you, good to be here.
Good. You called the rand South Africa's primary business risk. But do we have a fundamentally broken currency, and I suppose country in that sense, or just a currency that needs a bit of TLC?
I think just to put a little bit of context around the observation around risk is to suggest that the point that I'm making is that the primary risk that any business faces, whether it's South African or another geography, the primary business risk that we face is macroeconomic. And I make the point, I think it's often easiest to make points by referring to others. So imagine building a brilliant business, superb product, fantastic growth, great people, except the business is built in the Ukraine and the year is 2014.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how brilliant you are at the business level, you've just built it in the wrong geography. So the primary risk that we face, if you accept that argument, is macroeconomic. And it suggests then that we should spend time and diligence interrogating questions around is the business that I'm doing, is the currency that I'm doing business in, is that a robust currency? Does it have stature? Does it have strength? And it's that sits behind the question, is the rand fractured or fragile?
Of course, there's nothing that you can do about it if you are a South African business owner and if that's the currency in which you operate.
Well, you know, in the immediate here and now, no, there's not a huge amount that you can do. But if you are a business owner, or if you're an investor, a capital allocator, or if you're an income earner, and you're earning revenue, profits, income in a currency that is baseless or without substance, then you might have made a very poor resource allocation decision.
Sure.
And you can do things to change that and alter that, although that's not the content of this note.
No, I mean, you know, the note you talk about the drivers of the currency. So you talk about external reliance and dependency, management and vulnerability, and absorptive capability. Yeah. So in layman's terms, what are you looking at there?
I thought there was layman's terms.
layman's terms, okay.
Julia, we researched countries that had experienced currency turbulence, that were prone to or vulnerable to weak currency markets, default on international debt. In other words, any place in which currency has been a big part of the story in a country. And in working through those country experiences over a number of decades, we allocate the factors that matter into three broad silos. And the first silo says that the country is dependent on, reliant on external business.
Okay, like the commodity cycles.
Commodity cycles. Look, that's a bit of a two-edged sword, because whilst you can be reliant on commodity exports, you could also be a superbly competitive export country, South Korea. So we need to cater for the recognition that there are different types of external reliance and vulnerability. Be that as it may, that's the first measure. The second measure is to say, how well is this country being managed? Because if you have a country that is resource reliant but well managed, that's a very different story to a country that's resource reliant and poorly managed, which will be thrown all over the place. An example of the first, resource reliant but well managed, is Chile. An example of the latter, resource reliant, poorly managed, Brazil. And the third silo says, regardless of how well you are managed and your external vulnerability or reliance, it is the case that through time, mistakes are made. So what is your ability to withstand misstepping, vulnerability? What is your ability to withstand mistakes? And that's the third absorptive silo.
Okay, so, I mean, taking these all into account, the conclusion, what conclusion do they lead you to about South Africa's currency's ability to recover, and what would be the catalysts to a recovery in the currency?
I see that you have on screen the factors then that we put in each of the silos, and in total it adds to 10 factors. We've used in every factor as many countries for which there is robust and reliable data. A score of 1 in the ranking is you're doing superbly well, and the bottom score says your work's cut out for you. And when we assess South Africa against these 10 criteria, South Africa ranks in what South Africa is often so good at doing. We come bang in the middle of the table. One would be you're doing phenomenal work. You've got great resilience, you're externally competitive, and bottom of the table says you are very vulnerable, you've got poor management, and you have no resilience. South Africa sits smack in the middle.
In fact, you said almost
score.
Halfway there, and you described us as middling, so we're just muddling our way through.
So the work that needs to be done is, I think we were given a stay of execution. If anything, I think there was a very generous approach taken to assessing South Africa in the S&P rating score. If you take the hard numbers, South Africa deserved a downgrade. We were given the benefit of the doubt. And what it makes clear then is through the second half of 2016, the Ministry of Finance needs to get on with righting the South African ship, and we need to see policy turn from talk into action.
I mean, you talk about a significant but not fatal policy misstep. So if that were the one factor that were to change in, say, the 10 most significant criteria you look at, which you enumerated there, would that be the factor that takes the rand back to having some sort of purchasing power?
Yeah, if you apply a purchasing power parity score to the South African rand, the currency should be much stronger. Now, anyone who's traveled overseas knows that the rand is punching way below purchasing power parity. I think that the three things that matter to the rand recovering, or deteriorating for that matter, are external conditions, silo 1, and the most obvious external condition is an improvement in commodity prices. The second is that we convert this talk into action, and that you see a recovery in economic growth in South Africa. And the third would be that microeconomic reforms start to take effect, most evidently the state-owned enterprises.
Okay. Right.
We get those three right. Good commodities, rand recovers, state-owned enterprises, we convert from talk to action. I think you could be looking at a much stronger rand. More of the same, you expect more of the same from the rand.
Okay. Adrian, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you.
Dr. Adrian Saville is Chief Strategist at Citadel.